Okay, so how you want to think mainly in terms of phone setting is, let's say, I'm gonna cover some basic things here. So first things first, obviously tonality is key. The way you get good tonality is by repetition and then rewatching calls back, and after that doing something called applied conscious effort. Let's call this APC or whatever. So applied conscious effort is when you look back onto something, recognize the mistake, and then next time you are put in that situation again, you make the changes necessary to correct that mistake. Applied conscious effort. Once you've done applied conscious effort, after enough repetitions, you are eventually going to have that thing that you do consciously turn into something you do subconsciously, which is when you get good tonality. It's when you can have your ums and ahs and internet like intentional tonality down to the point where you do it without thinking, because you've gone through it so many times and you've seen the result of that thing happen so many times, so that it just becomes second nature to you, right? What a good tonality sounds like is it doesn't necessarily sound like a Jeremy Minor tonality where you're obviously has good tonality, right? He's a great salesman, but it doesn't work for all people. I found you could do the sales voice, but the best thing I found naturally is how you're speaking with somebody. Let's say like on a Zoom meeting, on a call. Like when I was coaching somebody, I give them an example of they worked a waiter job. So just I told them to put their phone in their pocket, hit record next time they go to their waiter job, and well, listen back to how they sound when they're speaking to customers, how they sound when they're speaking normally to other people. And that's essentially the tonality you want to mimic on your calls, so you actually sound natural and organic, and you're not putting some type of facade on or whatever. Secondly, you definitely want to end your enunciations on like a downward enunciation, because upward inflections give weird vibes. There's some times where you can use like upward inflections to like signal some specific type of emotion inside of your prospect, to like kind of do like a little disarming technique stuff, but like that type of stuff is unnecessary, not that necessary, right? 90% of the time you want to end on a downward inflection. You'll then eventually gauge when you can eventually do a good upward inflection, right? So tonality also comes with just repetition, obviously. You want to get comfortable saying the same things you've said, whether it's through your script or framework, ideally framework, not just the exact same script, but you get comfortable saying the same things over and over again. Let me take a sip of water. And obviously good tonality and good call energy isn't something you just get from spamming caffeine, even though I would love that, but no, it's something you also get if you like the people you're talking to. That's why the setting position you're in and the role you're in is very, very crucial when it comes to your performance, because if you don't like speaking to the people you speak to, then it's not really gonna, like, they'll feel that, right? There's signs that you're not skilled enough consciously to apply to make them not feel that way. So they're gonna feel that way. So it's also an inward reflection of belief expressed in an outward reflection of actual, practitioner, you could say. But yeah, after you want to get your tonality down, which, I've just explained, obviously you want to learn your script by heart. You want to know everything, but you also want to go a step further. And besides liking the people that you talk to, you want to have the belief that what you're actually selling them on and the people you're going to connect them to, aka the closers, are somebody that can actually help them by pitching them a rightful solution for their current situation, which you get this conviction by obviously watching testimonials, right? I even in DM setting, I've learned that watching testimonials is such a cheat code, because it actually makes you care more for the conversation and the words you're typing on screen. And obviously that's going to be much more of an amplifier when you're on the phone setting. And this also ties into the fact that by the end of the call, usually in the tie down, after the pre-pitch and the pitch, and booking the call, you always want to relate the prospect situation with a testimonial of a prospect that was in a similar situation. Like, if John is in car sales making 10K a month, you want to relate it to Ricardo, who was in car sales making 10K a month, and then transition to high ticket sales, and now he makes 20K a month, or whatever, right? You always want to have that transition, and you don't want to make it like surface level. This is a skill that you start learning more and more the more you get on calls and do certain things. But when you get on a call and you relate the prospect situation to another prospect, you don't just say, "Hey, John, so you're in car sales, you're making 10K a month, you should really watch this testimonial of Ricardo. He was in car sales also making 10K a month before he went into this." You want to go a few levels deeper into that. And obviously that also reflects in your tonality and the way you express yourself on the call. So instead of saying what I just said there, you want to say something like, "Yeah, John, so, okay, you actually kind of remind me of one of our clients, Ricardo, a bit too much. I don't know if it's just the way you're talking or the fact that he also had a daughter on the way, but he was also in car sales, making between like 5 to 10K a month on good months, working 12-hour days. He couldn't see his family, but he really wanted to like make a change, and he was hungry for it. And he really applied himself well to the program, and he eventually got into a 15K a month remote sales position. So I really think that his story would resonate with you. Do you want me to like send that over to you so you can kind of go through it before the call, just to kind of see how his perspective and how that kind of changed his life? Yeah, so something like that, right? Now obviously that's just me winging it. This obviously can differ, whether you're B2B or B2C, but yeah, because by relating the situation to the prospect, like the testimonial to a prospect, and relating it on a deeper level, not only are they going to trust you more, trust the process, they're way more likely to actually show up and also take action on watching the pre-call materials, so that when they show up to the call, they've absorbed a ton of knowledge, so that they're more likely to close as well. So yeah, these are pretty crucial things for belief. Now, so tonalities, you want to learn that, you want to know your script, but you want to have conviction in the thing that you're selling, right? But when I say script, I don't mean just word by word stuff. You need to have a framework, but you also want to kind of just go deeper than framework. You want to, a good mentor of mine said it like this: you want to have it in stages, right? So when you have something in stages, it's much more easier than following a script, because a script is like a straight line, right? But in reality, no call itself is always going to be a straight line. It's going to be a zigzag pattern, right? You might have to ask a question further down the script earlier. You might have to pre-handle an objection, maybe even like, you essentially get it, right? You have to go and kind of fix things, right? So with the framework, what a framework allows you to do is that when the call goes like this, you're able to sometimes take it out where it doesn't need to be, based off sales intuition. So if you need to ask a question before, or you need to like pre-handle an objection or something, you do that when the time comes right. But since you're holding frame and you're in charge of like actually leading the call, you also want to drag it back to where it needs to be, right? And then there might be something else, but essentially this zigzag line, if you have good frame and you're a good setter, is going to kind of look more like this instead of this, and it's never going to look like a straight line. Yeah, hold on, give me a sec. Ooh, yeah. Excuse me, but yeah. So what some good stages will look like is, let's just do this, right? Now, I'd say it's not necessarily the hardest part about a phone call, like a phone setting call. It's more so the reason I call it the hardest part is because it's the most crucial part. So if something's the most important, it typically sometimes means it's the hardest part, because you want to be consistent at it, right? But once you get it consistent, you're always going to be able to do it, right? And that's having a good opener. When you have a good opener, it's going to make this entire process, this entire framework go so much smoother, because you set frame at the start, and the prospect gives you the yes to lead them through the frame. Which means that when you say an opener, The opener is usually always going to be 90 to 100%, like word by word, something that's carefully curated to get the outcome that you're looking for and set the frame, right? It's going to allow the prospects to be disarmed, you know. So instead of saying, "Hey, John, you filled out our form. I'm here to, you know, try to book you in," right? Extreme example, right? You want to obviously go a few levels lower than that and be like, "Hey, John, I saw you filled out our application for high ticket sales training. Like, I honestly just wanted to call you to see if I can maybe provide you with some like free trainings we have, or at least like point you in the right direction, maybe get you to speak to one of our advisors here on the team. So I was just curious to see how I could help out. Do you have like 5 to 10 minutes so I could kind of explain that further?" And then, yeah, you know, you kind of just go from there, right? That's just me winging it based off phone setting calls I've listened to, right? So a good opener is going to be key here. You want to keep the tonality, the script like 95% the same, right? You always has to be consistent to get consistent outcomes, right? And then obviously you have discovery. This is probably the easiest part. Just because you have a bunch of questions on screen, but you never want to only ask those questions. You have to develop your sales muscle in your brain to be able to have good discovery. Because if you have good discovery, you're going to build the right pain or the right desire, depending on the prospect. Good discovery will come by training your sales muscle. Like I said, how do you train your sales muscle? You take a lot of calls and you reflect on it, and then you do applied conscious effort. When you rewatch your setting calls, you're going to have to ask yourself, okay, I asked John how much he's currently making, right? How could I have asked that in a better way? Instead of maybe asking him, "Yeah, John, so how much are you currently making in car sales?" You know, I could have been like, "Oh, okay, John, so, you know, it seems to me just from what I've heard in your situation right now that you're not too happy in your current role. If you don't mind me asking, how much would you need to earn from, you know, high ticket sales to be able to just start replacing what you're currently making in car sales?" Right? Strategic little things like that. You know, if you do enough homework on your own calls, you're essentially going to be able to get to a level where everything is just so secondhand and advanced in your nature that you do it casually, that it's going to, as a process, make each conversation result in a predictable outcome, which is what business owners are looking for. Which is why you want the good discovery and to train that sales muscle in your head. And yeah, essentially what you're doing here is you also, in discovery, you want to build something I like to call sales intuition. I don't even know if it's an official term. I just call it that. In sales intuition, you want to, because you can't, like, for example, you could ask one prospect, the same prospect. You could ask him the same 10 to 20 questions, but in different tonalities and in different ways, that with one way, he doesn't have any pain built up, despite him being asked the same questions and giving similar answers. Versus one way, he's in a lot more pain just because he feels the connection in the conversation. He feels the fact that you actually care, and he feels all this stuff, right? Which is why you want to ask questions, and for him to believe that you're asking these questions outside of a sales process, because you don't want them to feel sales resistance on these calls. If they feel sales resistance on these calls, you lost them. Which is why you want to get past that sales resistance by being a bit cheeky, a bit cunning. Or by cheeky and cunning, I mean genuine, because they'll be able to feel the genuine energy you give off, right? So yeah, when it comes to like the discovery stuff, you want to make sure that you build enough pain or enough desire, depending on the type of prospect you're speaking to. Which means that you are going to have to, by instinct, know when the prospect has enough pain built up or has enough desire built up, and if the gap between where they currently are and where they want to be has been covered enough, right? Like, you know, Gojo's Hollow Purple, right? But it needs to be separated so that once you've built enough pain, then you can obviously just continue what you're currently doing, which at this point, you want it to go into the pre-pitch. The pre-pitch is giving advice to the prospect, right? It's a sort of mini coaching on their situation, because look, you as a setter, even though you're not a coach, you speak to like 100 people a week that are in the same situation, that need the same solution that you guys are selling. which means you've spoken to so many people. You already have the experience to kind of give a little bit of advice on their current situation. Obviously, you don't give them, a full 1 hour coaching call, right? You give them 3 to 5 minutes of something that they believe could actually work. And that's going to come from your conviction, from your ability to frame yourself properly, more than just the actual advice, because it's easy to give advice once you know prospect A doesn't have money, and their solution makes them more money, and your product has testimonials of other people making more money, and you watch those testimonials, see what they had to solve. It's very easy to give bare minimum, like genuine level of advice that could actually like give somebody more trust into it, like in what you're currently doing. And once you've done that for like 3 to 5 minutes, then obviously it's just the pitch, right? Explaining what you guys actually do, digging back into the discovery and pain in the conversation that you've gone, and genuinely believing you can help like solve this problem for them, which then ends up being a booking, right? You book them into the sales call, which is usually the easiest part of a phone setting call. So once you've booked them in, after that, you want to tie down the call, you could say. By tying down the call, obviously, like once you book them in, and make sure they get the calendar invites, see all of that stuff, then you tie it down. When you tie it down, you want to glaze your closer, right? You want to be like, hey, you're going to be meeting with George. He's our top dog. He's helped over 500 people make their transition into this space. You're essentially glazing the closer, and like even saying lines like, look, I know I'm a bit biased here, John, because I'm the one talking to you, but by the way, that I'm biased line, it kills. I've seen it live, so do it. But yeah, I'm biased here, John. Obviously, I'm a bit biased, but could you just do me like a little favor here? Like, do you think you could actually like show up to the call and make sure that you're in a like nice environment, quiet space, laptop, pen and paper, so you're kind of ready for the call? Because if you're not fully prepared, that means, well, that's going to reflect bad on me with the team, and then George isn't going to have the ability to actually help you, sit down and solve this problem that you've been having for, what, you relate it back to what they said. And yeah, pretty much that, honestly. You want to relate it back to things they've said. You want to glaze the closer. You want to say the unbiased line. You want to say that it reflects badly on you if they don't show up seriously in a quiet spot for the call. And that's typically what a good tie down is. Here is when you also do the testimonial reflection, right? So when you also say, once you're tying down the closer and everything like that, you give the testimonial, or let's just make it a separate stage, right? You give the testimonial or the pre-call materials, right? You give the pre-call materials, happy, you sell them. You don't just send it to him. Obviously, probably good I actually explain this so it doesn't get so it doesn't go over people's heads, but you want to actually relate the pre-call materials to the prospect, right? Typically, a pre-call page will have multiple videos, right? Common FAQs, stuff like that, right? Based off the conversation you've had, you're probably going to be able to gauge which part helps them the most. If not, you'll have general parts that help them the most. So you want to give them the exact testimonial that they reminded you of, that you related to them, and then you want to point them to exact videos and give them reasons to watch them based off the conversation. All right. So if somebody gave you a price objection, right, put them towards the price objection pre-call video material that handles that objection, right? Or if they want to see how much this has worked, obviously, relate to the testimonial. If they want more industry knowledge, like an industry deep dive, right? Anything, right? You want to send that over to them. And yeah, then it's tie down pre-call materials, and that's, is that it? Tie down pre-call materials. I'm pretty sure that's kind of it. What I would do more, honestly, like by the end of this is, maybe it's too long, but regardless, like the last stage is going back to like the mini tie down in a sense, where it's like you double down on the favor you asked them. You double down on the fact that you want them to show up, so you don't get reflected badly. Obviously, you don't say it in the same way. You say it in a completely different way, but in a way that has the same actual meaning, right? Because this will increase your show rates a lot, because then you're asking for it twice, and the spacing in between by the end of the call, with all that you've gone through this prospect with, they're gonna have so much trust that it's obviously they're gonna show up, right? And yeah, that's pretty much what I'd break down in terms of stages, just from what I personally know. But yeah, obviously this works. Like, all of this just works. It's just a matter of you actually applying it and making sure it works. And obviously, I can't stress this enough, but this can only work if you as a person work, right? Oops. If you as a person work, what that means is, like, obviously, if you're not sleeping in the night, I'm not the best example for this because I do a lot of sleepless nights, but I'm still able to perform. You want to make sure you're in a good routine, right? You want to sleep, you want to eat healthy, you want to make sure you are dialed in all aspects of your life, because the biggest drop in performance that setters experience is when their real life starts affecting their KPIs, because the real life stuff has a deep mirroring in your setting life, in your work life. So you first want to fix yourself, want to fix your environment, want to fix what you eat, your routine, what you sleep, how you let other people affect you. You want to fix all of this stuff so that you're able to actually apply all of this in a clear state of mind, right? That's probably the most important thing, like, ever. Okay, so yeah, I think that's it for this training. If I forgot anything, just DM me. But yeah, let's crush it, guys. Okay, so going back to things, I think I slightly missed something here. Somebody drew my attention to it because I thought it was obvious, but it should obviously be covered because this is mainly for beginners. But when you're at discovery, right, it's very, very important that in discovery you do something called financially qualifying, FQ, right? Obviously, so you save your closers time. You don't have them speaking with people you guys can't help, or people just can't really afford it, right? Yeah, I mean, you can be direct about it, but like I mentioned earlier, right? It's better to, like, get around that and have a slight inclination. This is where you train your sales intuition in. So you want to obviously see, like, how much money they need to earn to, like, replace what they're currently making. If it's a money offer, if it's not a money offer, you just probe into their job situation, stuff like that. It's really important. The way I would recommend for, like, a financial type of offer, because that's mainly what I've worked on, is to, instead of just asking them, like, how much do you have in the bank account, on a setting call, usually you can't get away with that, unless you pull some crazy shenanigans. But yeah, no, you want to, in a sense, just, like, get a good gauge of things, right? Like, if they're currently working as, like, a manager at Walmart, they say they're making like $4,000 a month, and they say it covers the bills. You probe further into the situation. Oh, so it's covering the bills right now? Like, do you guys even save? Like, do you save anything at the end of the month from that, or are you just living paycheck to paycheck, right? Because then, if they're saving something, they might have something stored up. And then you can kind of get a good gauge of how much money they have, obviously. Alongside from that, it also depends how much pain they're in financially, or if it's more of a desire thing. Usually people have more of a desire thing, are more qualified. Obviously, they're the best type of prospects. You want to, this applies mainly, I mean, not only, but mainly to the ones who are in pain, and you're building pain up into, and, like, extending the past, like, their current situation to their future situation. And when you're doing that, you want to obviously get a clear sense of where they currently are, and you just do that by strategically asking them questions, right? Because you want to make sure your closer is speaking to somebody who can afford it, and actually be able to get the results. So you can find a bunch of different questions by just critically thinking about what specifically, like, somebody with money would have, their verbiage, stuff like that. Like, if they're saying they're living paycheck to paycheck, usually not a good sign, but, like, you can still probe further into that. Because if they say they're living paycheck to paycheck, you probe further. You're like, oh, how long has this been going on? Like, you guys even making, all the proper bills, or you guys are not in debt or anything, you can always probe further, right? That's why discovery is a very important part. And having childlike curiosity on the call is going to serve you as such a big net benefit when it comes to actually like having good discovery, figuring out their pain, their desire, and if they're actually qualified for what you do. And obviously, when they're qualified, you move on to the rest of the process. Another thing here is that there on setup calls, you don't do a lot of objection handling. You do like objection deflection. You kind of deflect those so that the actual closer handles them by answering them vaguely, and then like continuing with a question, or kind of doubling down and moving on with the process. Some things I would recommend, obviously, is that if they're married, you most of the time want to, like, when you're booking them in, to find a time where both the husband and the wife can be on the call and actually attend the call, because then it's gonna help get rid of a lot of, like, maybe 2 call closes the closer has to do if they're very stubborn about the wife objection, and kind of things like that. You'll get a sense of how you can pre-handle things, honestly, by just like even like speaking to your closer, and because it depends on the offer you're on, B2C, B2B, and getting a good gauge from your closer on the exact ICP you guys have. Obviously, you can only know this when you're in a role, but like, yeah, this is just a blank framework that you can apply to absolutely anything, which is why it's good and pretty crucial to have. And I think that's mainly everything else I wanted to add on to this. But yeah.